Hey guys, my name is Gabby. Welcome back to my channel, and today I'm going to be doing my January wrap up. Because it's already the end of January, if you can hardly believe it. I certainly cannot. And in the month of January, I was able to read 12 books, which is actually really exciting because I had a really great reading month this month, not just quantity wise but also quality wise. I feel like I've just had a really great reading month. So out of those 12 books, I had 3 5-stars this month. One of those was a reread, and then I had 5 4-star books, 2 3-star books, and 2 2-star books. So she wasn't perfect, but she was close. I also had 2 romances this month. I had 4 thrillers. I read 2 horrors, 2 contemporary or like literary fiction kind of books, 1 Greek mythology book, and 1 memoir or nonfiction kind of book. So let's just jump into all the books I read this month. So the first one is going to be The Dating Plan, and this was the very first book I read in 2021. So usually I feel like I'm cursed because every time I pick up a book that's like the first book I read in a new year, it always ends up sucking and being like super disappointing. But I feel like this year I broke that curse because this book was really cute. It was really enjoyable. This was a January Book of the Month Club selection, and this one is like a really adorable romance that takes place in like the San Francisco Bay Area, and we're following these 2 characters who decide to become fake fiancés because he's trying to get a fake fiance because he's trying to inherit his like father's business because his dad recently passed away, but he said he can only inherit the business if he's married. She is trying to escape from arranged marriage because her family keeps trying to like set her up with all these different guys, and they like expect her to be married, so they decide to become fake fiancés and fake date and all that, and it's just the most fun. I ended up giving this one 4 stars. Like the only reason why I ended up knocking off the star is because I did find some of it to be kind of irritating because these characters actually did know each other in high school, and this guy had actually stood her up at prom, which is, you know, totally shitty. Like, don't like that at all. But also, like, it was kind of annoying the way she just really held on to that, like, and kind of used it against him for like the entire book. And she would just tell everyone that she meets, like, oh, he stood me up at prom in high school, and just like she just wouldn't let it go. And I know like that's obviously a super shitty thing to have happened to her, so like in a way I kind of understand, but also it just kind of got irritating to read about that constantly. But besides that, I really enjoyed this. This was like a really fun book, and it was just the perfect vibe I wanted to start this year with, you know, like I just wanted to start it with like a fun, cute romance, and that's exactly what I got from this. So really enjoyed this one. The second book I read this month was Memorial by Bryn. I was really stoked because my library finally had this audiobook available, so I was able to download the audiobook and then read along with reading it physically. This book is more like a contemporary like literary fiction style book, but we follow these 2 gay men, and what I found to be really interesting about this book is the different representation that's in this book. So we have Mike in this book, who is Japanese American, and then we have Ben in this book, who is Black, and he's also HIV positive. I think just the fact alone that we're following these 2 characters who offer very unique point of views was really interesting to read about this book. But overall, I found this book to be kind of slow and just like really depressing. I didn't really notice it because I was more listening to the book than reading the book physically, but there is no quotation marks around the dialogue in this book, which is usually kind of a pet peeve of mine when I'm trying to read books. But because I had the audiobook, it didn't bother me too much. But just in case you wanted to know if you were thinking of reading this physically, I don't know if that bothers you, but it usually does bother me. Overall, I found this story to be written in a way that was like really real and raw, to the point where it was making me kind of like depressed. It was just kind of sad subject matter that was happening in this book, because basically like this book is about this couple's relationship and how they're starting to feel like either like they're falling out of love or there's just something wrong, like they're just not communicating the way that they used to. And it's just a really real and honest look at what happens in a relationship when things start to go wrong. And it was just sad. It was depressing, but it's also like written in a very realistic way. So I ended up giving this book 3 out of 5 stars. It's not a new favorite, but I really enjoyed my time reading this. The third book that I read this month was The Winter People by Jennifer McMahon, and this one is the first book that I read for Winter Week Winterween, which was a readathon that happened this month that was hosted by me and Olivia. And this was definitely my favorite book that I read this month. I freaking love The Winter People. I will shout it from the rooftops. This is probably gonna be like in my top 10 of the year. I'm already calling it now. And this book is this horror novel that is very reminiscent of Pet Sematary by Stephen King. It has a very similar plot and very similar vibe, so I think that's why I really clicked with this. But in this book, we're kind of following, there's two timelines. One of them is kind of a historical timeline because it's taking place in 1908, and then the other one is a present day timeline, but it's all taking place kind of in the same town. In this town, there's some weird things going on, like people are disappearing with no explanations. Some of the kids in the town think it's like aliens, like they don't really know, but these people are just going missing with no explanation, and it's happening all the time in this town. And we are following two people in different timelines in 1908 and in the present day who both have someone in their lives that go missing, and then we kind of figure out what's going on with them. The small town vibes in this book are freaking great. The like wintry vibes in this book are really great because it all has like this snowy atmosphere, and like the house that these people live on is like right on this like woods property, so it's very like dark and woodsy and snowy vibes the whole book, which I just loved so much. And this plot was just so interesting. Like right from the beginning, I was freaking hooked into this mystery of what was happening in both of the timelines, and I was just so surprised by where it went. And oh my gosh, there was a few scenes in this book that truly scared me. Like, as I was reading this book late at night in my room, and some of the scenes that was describing like this little girl, I was getting pretty freaked out, like not gonna lie. I'm pretty sure I slept with the lights on. It was a scary time. So I just loved so much. I love this book so much. There's so much to love about it. I gave it 5 stars. It's one of my new favorites. However, the next book I read this month was The Haunting of Bryn Wilder by Wendy Webb. This was actually our buddy read for Winterween, for our, you know, readathon, and me and Olivia ended up doing a live show to discuss all about this book. We both didn't really enjoy it, which is unfortunate, and I'm so sorry for putting all of you through this if you read this book this month with us. But this book, it's supposed to be like, I guess it's supposed to be like considered a horror or like paranormal romance type of thing, but honestly it was just kind of boring. And this book just had so many things that I was like cringing over. Like the romance is just not great in my opinion in this book, and the ending was unbelievably cheesy and just kind of ridiculous. But besides that, this kind of just read like a Nicholas Sparks romance in the summer with like a bit of some paranormal ghost stuff happening. I don't know, I didn't really have that great of a time. I ended up giving this one 2 stars, but me and Olivia go into great detail about this book, and we kind of roasted a little bit in the live show, so if you want to watch that, I will leave that linked down below. And then the last book that I ended up reading for Winterween was A Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson. This one is a young adult thriller that I went into thinking maybe I'll enjoy, because I usually don't typically enjoy young adult thrillers, but so many people have been hyping this book up for like over a year, and I'm like, you know what, maybe one day I'll just give it a shot. And I'm so glad I did, because this book was so much fun. I was able to check out the audiobook from my library for this, so I was listening to the audio while I was reading along physically, and I highly recommend the audiobook. If you can get your hands on the audiobook, oh my god, it's so fun. She's working on this case that was closed in her town earlier, where this young girl was murdered, and then her boyfriend got accused of the murder, but she doesn't think that the boyfriend did it, and then the boyfriend ended up killing himself like a few days later. So the whole small town just kind of blamed this murder on the boyfriend, and they never really like looked into it more than that. So she's re-diving into this case for her school project, and she wants to figure out what actually happened. But it's really cool because this book is almost told as if it's her school project, so you kind of get to see the actual raw interviews with people and the phone calls she does with people, and like all of her research is like put together in this, and it's really freaking cool. It's like you're getting to solve this murder and what happened with her. And in the audiobook it's really cool because they actually make it sound like it's a phone call. Like they have like phone noises, and it sounds like they're on a phone. Like I don't know how to explain it, but it's really freaking cool. And it has a full cast of narrators, so every single character has a different voice, and it's just fantastic. It's such a good audiobook, highly recommend. And not only that, but the story itself was so fast-paced and so interesting. I really cared about all of these characters and the plot twists. I didn't see it coming, and yeah, I had a great time. I ended up giving this one 4 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read this month was The Wife Upstairs by Rachel Hawkins. This was actually our first book club pick for the book troop, which is a new book club that I just started where we read thrillers together. And we actually just had the first live show for this book a few days ago on my YouTube channel, so I'll have to leave the link down below for the live show if you missed it. But I was joined by my sister and it was a really fun time discussing this book with everyone. I will say though, you might not think it from the live show, but I really enjoyed this book because in the live show we kind of got into like the nitty-gritty details about what irritated me about this book, but also I feel like this is just a thriller that I just really enjoyed my time reading. This book is just very entertaining. It follows this woman named Jane, who is this dog walker in this super rich neighborhood, and she happens to meet one of these men in this neighborhood named Eddie, and he immediately hires her to be his dog walker even though he doesn't have a dog yet. And we find out that Eddie's wife has recently gone missing, that they don't know what happened to her, and so there's a lot of mystery happening there with that. In this thriller, were the characters annoying? Yes. Did they all suck? Yes. But did I have so much fun reading this and I literally couldn't put it down? Yes. I finished this book literally within 24 hours. I was so engaged in the mystery that was happening in this book, and even though it wasn't like a 100% satisfying, like one of the best thrillers I've ever read, I still had so much fun reading this, and I can't deny that this book had me freaking hooked around its fingers. So I'm still giving this book 4 stars. Next book I read this month was The Snowman by Jo Nesbo, and this was the very first book that I read for the video I did this month of reading Noelle Gallagher's favorite books. I will leave that vlog linked down below if you missed it, but I had such a fun time doing that vlog this month. It was a really fun video. But this was the first book I read for that video, and unfortunately I was pretty disappointed by The Snowman. I kind of knew going into this that this probably wasn't going to be my thing because this is a thriller that follows from a detective point of view. We're following from this detective Harry, and he's kind of figuring out what's going on with this weird serial killer case, because there's this serial killer who's running around the town leaving snowmen in like the front yards or the backyards of people who are getting killed, and it's like, it's super creepy. It's a really great concept, but my god, this book was like 500 pages and it was just so slow and so boring. But the horrific things that were happening in this book were truly horrific and terrifying, and so I ended up giving this one 2 stars. It didn't really work for me. I feel like this book did have a lot of potential, but because it's from a detective point of view, I was just gonna be bored probably no matter what, so this is probably more of a me thing than the book thing. And then for that video, I also ended up rereading The Hating Game by Sally Thorne, because this is one of my favorite romances of all time, and it's been so long since I've reread The Hating Game because this is my 3rd time reading this book this time around. But and this book follows Lucy and Josh. They're both working for a book publisher, and they're both trying to compete to get the same promotion, so it's just very entertaining. It's very like hate to love vibes. Their banter is just god tier, and this book just made me so happy. Like, I'm genuinely so glad I decided to reread this month. It was exactly the kind of lift up to my spirits that I needed, and I gave this 5 stars. Of course, do you even have to ask? And then I read The Song of Achilles, and this was another one that I read for that video of reading Noelle's favorites. This is one that I've had my eye on for a couple of years now that I've been wanting to read, but also I know this is so outside of my comfort zone that it kind of like put me off of reading it for a long time, because this one is a Greek mythology story, and it's also kind of like this beautiful ass male romance, which I didn't really realize that that's what it was going to be about when I was going into it, and I absolutely loved that aspect of it. Don't ask me to pronounce any of the character names in here because I struggle with that, but our main character in this book, I'm pretty sure his name's Patroclus. I even listened to the audiobook and I can't even tell you how to pronounce his name. He was amazing. Like, he's one of my favorite like main character point of views that I've ever read from, just because he's so, I don't know, he was just so interesting to read about, and I just really connected with him as a main character, and he just has such a passion for Achilles, and it's just so beautiful to see like how much he loves him, you know? Their romance was just giving me all the feels in this book, and I thought it was really great, and it was looking to be a 5-star book for me up until the last like 100 pages or so, because then it goes into this like war scenes, and the war scenes just go on for so long, and they're just so boring because it becomes less about their romance and more about the war, but then the ending is very beautiful and very satisfying. So I ended up giving this one 4 stars. I don't know if it's like a new all-time favorite, just because the end started to drag a whole lot for me, but my god, this story is beautiful and I totally understand the hype with this. And then the last book that I ended up reading for that video is Writers and Lovers by Lily King. This one is kind of this contemporary fiction, maybe slash literary fiction kind of story about this woman who's in her 30s and her mom has recently died and she's just kind of trying to figure out life. She's still working as a waitress. She is also a writer though, and she just doesn't really know what she wants to do. I feel like this book just wasn't totally my thing. This book was really depressing and really sad. The writing style of it kind of reminded me of like Normal People by Sally Rooney, or even like Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine. It's like one of those books that doesn't really have a plot, but you're just kind of following this character going through something in their lives and you just kind of follow them with their struggle and kind of get to see them overcome those things in a way. And this book, I just have mixed feelings about it because part of me was like really bored with this story and I just didn't feel like I really connected with it, but then another part of me really did connect with this towards the end, and I almost got emotional because it was just hitting me so hard. But this book was just really sad. It was just hard for me to imagine putting myself in this main character's shoes. I just couldn't imagine dealing with the things that she had dealt with. So I ended up giving this book 3 stars. It wasn't like a favorite for me, but I can definitely understand why some people really love this and really connect with this. All right, the 11th book that I read this month was this memoir called The Fixed Stars, and this is one that I just randomly decided to listen to because I had this audiobook on Libro for like a few months now and I just totally forgot that it was still in my library of like books that I wanted to listen to. This one is a really interesting memoir because it's about this woman who she's been married for more than 10 years and she has a toddler with her husband, and then it's about how she starts to discover that she thinks she's falling in love with this woman, discovering something about herself that she never knew was there. And I think this memoir was just really interesting in the sense that, you know, learning about how no matter how old you are, like you're always going to be maybe changing or like discovering new things about yourself. And I just think the discussion about sexuality in this book was really interesting. This book kind of also dives into the topic of like open relationships. You know, marriages can be so challenging when like it's like, what do you put first? You know, like do you put yourself first and like do you put your identity and like maybe exploring your sexuality, do you put that before your marriage, you know? Because it's like, it's hard when she's been married for so long. I don't know. I just thought it was a really interesting audiobook and I ended up giving this one 4 stars. And I just think it's a really interesting topic in general to just talk about sexuality and how that might change throughout your life. And then the last book that I read this month was The Push. And oh my gosh, I was talking about this book in my book haul video and I was saying how I got this book originally because I was really excited about it. It's a thriller that just sounds like it's going to be really intense. And then some people were comparing this book to Baby Teeth and I was getting pretty nervous thinking I wasn't going to like this because I really didn't like Baby Teeth and just that comparison alone was kind of like setting me off from it. But after I said that in the book haul video, so many people were commenting and they were like, no, The Push is amazing, you need to read it. And it just kind of pushed me and motivated me to like immediately read it. Holy fuck, I am so glad that I decided to read this because this was a 5-star book for me. I freaking loved this book. I will warn you, I don't necessarily think this book is a thriller. Like, I think if you go into this book expecting an intense thriller, you're probably going to be disappointed. And so I can totally see why there are so many people disliking this book because I feel like it's a case where this might be getting mismarketed a little bit. But on the inside flap here, this does say a tense, page-turning psychological drama. And I would agree more with that. I do think it's more of like a psychological drama and it's a real like character study type of book as opposed to like the thrillers that you're probably used to reading. But this book was just haunting. It was so good. And basically, if you didn't know anything what this book is about, we're just following this woman named Blythe who she's with her husband whose name is Fox. I know that's a very strange name. Fox wants a family and she's unsure what she wants, but she wants to see him happy. So they decide to have a baby together. And this book kind of talks about the making and breaking of their family. I think the comparisons from Baby Teeth come from the fact that she doesn't really get along with their daughter and that their daughter might be the spawn of Satan. Okay, so that's where that comparison comes from and that's where the thrillery aspect of this book really comes in. But I feel like this was done in such a more realistic way. Like, this book was terrifying to me because it felt so real. Like, this book really highlights all of my fears of parenthood. Like, I don't even know if I want kids in the future, but if I were to want kids, this is exactly what my fear would be, because this mom is talking about how, you know, she's just not connecting with the baby. She's like, she's scared she was never meant to be a mother. She has all of these crazy thoughts, and then not only that, but on top of that, her daughter might be the fucking spawn of Satan. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just not a good time. And then there's just all of these things happening that I'm not gonna spoil for you, but it's just, it's terrifying. And I can see how some people might not enjoy this book because it does get kind of repetitive, and like, you know, you're just following this one woman, like this one character this entire book. And so I can see how it can get kind of maybe repetitive and boring for some people, but I was absolutely engaged. Like, I could not put this book down. I had to know where this was going. I had to know what was going to happen to their family, and I loved it. I loved it so fucking much. I know it's weird to say, but I feel like this book has major Coney Island by Taylor Swift vibes. Like, if you listen to the lyrics of that song, it just matches this book and this family so well. And the things that happened in this book were just truly horrific, and it just made me so sad for this family. Like, my heart literally broke for Blythe. And I just think this is one of the best, like, character study type books that I've ever read. Really dark and really depressing, and it's like, the subject matter is really intense. There's a lot of trigger warnings for some really unsettling things that are really hard to read about. My god, if you're in a headspace where you're okay to read something that's truly, truly dark and horrific, this book is incredible. It's just, it's so good. So this was a 5-star book for me. But after talking more about The Push, I'm like, is The Winter People my favorite book that I read this month, or is it The Push? Like, I don't know. These two were just so fucking good and so surprising. All right, well, those are all the books that I read in the month of January. Like I said, it was a great time. Like, there were some stinkers there for sure, but for the most part, I had a really great reading month. I really enjoyed most of the books that I read this month, and I had so much fun participating in Winterween this month. We did the book club pick this month, and I did a fun video of like reading Noelle's favorites. Like, it was just a really great and productive month. And yeah, please let me know, what did you read in the month of January? What was the best book that you read this month? And if you've read any of these books that I mentioned, let me know your thoughts on them. And thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you very soon with a new video. Bye. I just need to do this. I can do this. Look, I can do this. Don't. No. No, don't.